My baby shower, a day meant for celebration, shattered when my jealous mom, Vesper, dragged my ex, Rune, through the door, uninvited and unwanted, claiming he was there to save me from my new life. What he revealed instead turned her scheme upside down, leaving her humiliated and regretful in front of everyone. I don't call her mom, though you'd think I would, like most kids do. She's always insisted Saffron, my half-sister, and I stick to Vesper. To her, Mom feels like a label for someone old, and she's never seen herself that way. She said more than once she's too young for it, as if the word might anchor her down. So, she's just Vesper, more like a neighbor or a friend than the mother she's supposed to be. If you love stories of resilience, reclaiming justice with style, and rediscovering your worth, hit that subscribe button for Graceful Revenge now. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Let's dive into the power of elegant revenge and life's deepest lessons together. Vesper was in high school when she got pregnant with me. The pregnancy wasn't something she or my biological father, Torin, had planned. In fact, she always refers to it as an accident, a word that's weighed heavily on me over the years, whether she realizes it or not. Vesper and Torin were high school sweethearts, but they were young, reckless, and not exactly thinking about consequences when they ended up in this situation. When Torin found out Vesper was pregnant, he made it clear he wasn't interested in being a partner to her. He agreed to pay child support and be there for me, but that was where his involvement ended. He wasn't going to play house with her or continue their relationship. This crushed Vesper, though she doesn't always admit it. She had expectations, however naive, of what their relationship might be like, and maybe, in some small part, she believed having a baby would make things more serious between them. But Torin didn't see it that way, and the reality of that shattered her. When I was born, things between Vesper and Torin didn't improve. In fact, they only got worse. Vesper couldn't let go of the resentment she held toward him, and it showed every time he came around. Torin would come to pick me up for visits or stop by to spend time with me, but instead of keeping things civil, Vesper would almost always pick a fight with him. She seemed to look for reasons to argue, even when there wasn't anything worth arguing about. She would lash out at him, sometimes over small, petty things, other times over bigger issues, mostly centered around her anger that he didn't want to be with her. I was too young to understand what was really happening at the time, so I didn't question her whenever she spoke poorly of Torin. Vesper would say things like, "He doesn't love you enough to marry me," or, "Fathers are supposed to take care of their families, and your dad's just a deadbeat." As a child, I didn't have the capacity to process what she was really saying, but as I got older, I started to see things differently. I began to realize that Torin wasn't the villain Vesper made him out to be. In fact, he was the opposite. He was consistent. He visited me every weekend without fail, always on time and always eager to spend time with me. He never missed a child support payment, and I could tell he genuinely loved being around me. I could feel that he cared about me, even if he and Vesper didn't have a good relationship. The more I grew up, the more I understood that Torin was doing everything he could to be a good father. Despite the circumstances, he wasn't perfect, but he certainly wasn't the deadbeat Vesper claimed he was. He was there for me, and that's what mattered most. When I was 6 years old, Vesper met Cassian, the man she would later marry and now calls the love of her life. It was kind of surreal watching her with him, seeing how different she could be. Cassian's a nice guy, really laid back, and from the beginning, he accepted me as part of his life without hesitation. He's always treated me like his own daughter, which has meant a lot to me, especially considering how complicated my relationship with Vesper has always been. Cassian was never the problem. He was steady and kind, and he made an effort to be there for me in ways Vesper often didn't. Not long after they got married, Vesper became pregnant again, this time with my half-sister Saffron. When Saffron was born, I was thrilled. I loved her from the start, and over the years, we've grown incredibly close. She's my best friend, and I'd do anything for her. But as much as I adore Saffron, there's no denying that Vesper's treatment of the two of us has always been painfully unequal. From the moment Saffron was born, it was obvious she was Vesper's favorite. Vesper showered Saffron with love and attention in a way I never experienced. I would watch them together, Vesper lighting up around her, doting on her, buying her pretty little dresses with matching shoes, making sure she had every toy or thing her heart desired. Saffron was, and still is, the apple of Vesper's eye. Meanwhile, I felt like an afterthought. Vesper was distant, almost cold toward me. She would hardly ever spend time with me, and when she did, there was this underlying tension, as if my very presence bothered her. Of course, it made me jealous. How could it not? I watched my sister get all the love and attention I craved from Vesper, and it hurt. It's not like I didn't try to win Vesper's affection. I did. But my requests for things, whether it was something as simple as a new dress or a toy I liked, were usually ignored or brushed off. Sometimes, instead of getting something new, she'd hand me my cousin's old things and tell me I didn't need anything new anyway, and that I should stop wasting unnecessary money. It's hard to put into words how much that kind of favoritism can sting. It's not just about the material things, it's the emotional distance, the way Vesper seemed to reserve all her warmth and affection for Saffron, leaving me to feel like an outsider in my own family. And even though I love Saffron with all my heart, I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt to see my own mother treat her so differently, as if Saffron were her only child. Every year, when Saffron's birthday rolled around, it was a big event, celebrated with a level of extravagance that made it clear just how much Vesper adored her. The parties were always filled with decorations, gifts, and an excited crowd of family and friends. There would be balloons, cake, and a whole lot of fuss made over Saffron, and you could tell Vesper poured her heart into making those days special. It was the kind of birthday every kid dreams of. In contrast, my birthdays always felt like an afterthought. I was never allowed to invite friends over for a party, not once. Some years, the extent of my celebration was Vesper ordering a pizza, and that was it. There was no cake, no decorations, no excitement, just a simple pizza delivery, and the day would pass without much attention. I remember how much it stung to see the stark difference between the way Vesper celebrated Saffron's birthdays and the way mine were barely recognized. It felt like another reminder that I wasn't as important to her, that I didn't deserve the same love or effort. When I got older and started pointing out to Vesper how unfair it was, she didn't try to explain herself or make things right. Instead, she'd snap back at me with a cold response like, "Go cry about it to Torin," as if he were somehow to blame for the way she treated me. She'd say things like, "This is all his fault," shifting the blame away from herself and onto him, as if her favoritism had anything to do with Torin's actions. It was her way of deflecting, of refusing to acknowledge the hurt she was causing. Torin, though, always tried to make up for it in whatever way he could. He knew how much birthdays meant to me, how special they should feel, and he never failed to be the first one to call me and wish me a happy birthday right at midnight. He'd buy me gifts and try to make the day feel special, even if it wasn't the same as having a big celebration. He noticed, too, how differently Vesper treated me and Saffron, and it upset him. I remember a couple of times when he tried to talk to Vesper about it. He wasn't confrontational. He just wanted to understand why she couldn't treat us both with the same love and care. But those conversations never went well. Instead of listening, Vesper would lash out, and it would quickly turn into a screaming match. She'd tell him to keep his opinions to himself, and that he had no right to comment on how differently she raised Saffron because she was married to Saffron's father, not him. She made it clear that, in her eyes, the fact that Cassian was Saffron's dad gave her permission to treat Saffron better. It was as if Torin's involvement in my life automatically disqualified me from receiving the same level of love or attention. That hurt more than anything. It felt like I was being punished for something that wasn't even my fault. When I went away to college, it became even clearer how little my presence really mattered to Vesper. If anything, I think she was relieved to finally have me out of the house. I noticed it in the way she acted, like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She rarely called, and visits from her were practically non-existent. The few times I did hear from her, it felt more like an obligation on her part, rather than any genuine desire to know how I was doing. Ironically, Cassian, Saffron, and Torin made far more effort to stay connected with me than Vesper ever did. They visited me more often, checking in to see how I was settling into college life and making sure I wasn't feeling alone. It was comforting, but it also hurt to see how little my own mother seemed to care. The lack of love and attention from Vesper stung deeply, but I tried not to dwell on it too much. I kept hoping that maybe, in time, whatever issue she had with me and Torin would fade away, and we could eventually have some kind of normal relationship. It was during my final year of college that I met Rune, my ex-boyfriend. He and I became serious pretty quickly, and for a while, things between us were great. He was supportive and made me feel seen, which was something I didn't often experience with my own family, especially not from Vesper. When I graduated college, it was a big moment for me. Torin, Cassian, Saffron, and even Vesper came to celebrate with me. But to be honest, Cassian had to convince Vesper to come. I knew she wouldn't have shown up if it hadn't been for his persistence. Still, it meant something to have them all there on such an important day. That day, Vesper met Rune for the first time, and to my surprise, she seemed almost captivated by him. I didn't think too much of it at first, but then she started making these weird comments, like how she couldn't believe someone as handsome as Rune was with someone like me. The first time she said it, I tried to shrug it off. After all, I'd gotten used to Vesper making offhand remarks that were more hurtful than she probably realized. Or maybe she did realize, I'm not sure. Either way, I let it go, telling myself it wasn't worth the energy to confront her. But then she did it again. We were all having lunch together after my graduation ceremony, and right there in front of Rune and the rest of the family, she made another similar comment, implying that I wasn't attractive enough to be with him, and joking if I was perhaps his charity case. This time, it wasn't just hurtful, it was downright humiliating, especially because she said it in front of Rune. I could feel the embarrassment rising in my chest, and I wasn't going to let it slide again, so I turned to her as calmly as I could and told her that the way she was talking about me and my boyfriend was creepy and that I was more than just my looks. I wanted her to understand how inappropriate and uncomfortable her comments were, not just for me, but for everyone at the table. Rune looked embarrassed by her comments as well. Even Torin, who usually tried to stay out of confrontations with Vesper, was clearly annoyed. He shot her a few warning glances, probably hoping she'd get the message and stop before things escalated. I could tell he didn't want to make a scene in front of Rune, but he was just as upset as I was. It wasn't just a small, thoughtless comment. It was another example of how she always seemed to find ways to put me down, even during one of the most important moments of my life, apparently. After that graduation day, Vesper and Rune became Facebook friends, which took me by surprise. Rune told me that she had sent him a friend request and asked if it was okay for him to accept. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, so I said it was up to him. He accepted her request just to be polite, because he knew, as well as I did, that if he didn't, she would bring up this issue in front of everyone else if she ever saw him next. It did feel odd to me that Vesper, who had barely shown any interest in my life while I was away at college, suddenly wanted to stay connected with my boyfriend on social media. Over the 3 years that Rune and I dated, Vesper maintained a polite, if distant, relationship with him. She would check in on him every now and then, leaving the occasional comment on his posts or sending him brief messages on Facebook. It wasn't anything overtly suspicious, but there was always an air of familiarity between them. Vesper never gave me that kind of attention, but with Rune, she seemed more engaged. During my relationship with Rune, he did point out to me once or twice how he felt Vesper was outright jealous of me in my life. He started pointing out all the little ways Vesper acted around me that made it seem like she was in some kind of competition with me, whether it was the way she belittled me, her tendency to dismiss my accomplishments, or even her weird fixation on my relationships. I was taken aback. Jealous of me? The idea had never crossed my mind, and I had always chalked up her behavior to general hostility or unresolved issues with Torin. But Rune was insistent. He could see it from the outside, the way she would subtly undermine me, and how she seemed almost bothered by the idea of me being happy with someone or successful in my career. At first, I resisted the idea. It was hard to accept that my own mother could feel something like jealousy toward me. But the more Rune brought it up, the more I started to notice the patterns myself, whether it was about my looks, my relationships, or even my achievements. Vesper always found a way to make me feel smaller. And when I thought about it from the perspective that maybe, just maybe, she was jealous, it all started to make sense. After that realization, I began to grow more cautious around Vesper. I found myself guarding my emotions more tightly, not letting her comments get under my skin as much. I wasn't sure what to do with the knowledge that my own mother might be jealous of me, but it definitely changed the way I interacted with her. I couldn't look at her behavior the same way anymore. What once felt like indifference or coldness now seemed more like a twisted sense of competition, and that thought, more than anything, made me distance myself emotionally from her even further. Rune and I broke up after 3 years of dating. Our breakup was pretty amicable. We both knew that while we cared about each other, our lives were moving in different directions, and it was time to part ways. We promised to stay friends, to keep in touch, but as is often the case, life got in the way. I got busy with my own life, and Rune did the same. Before long, we lost touch completely, and that chapter of my life quietly closed. Then, 2 years ago, I met Kael, and everything changed. He was, and still is, everything I could have ever wanted in a partner. Kael is kind and thoughtful, and makes me feel valued in ways I hadn't experienced before. With him, things felt right. We talked openly about our dreams and our future, and for the first time, I started to see a real path toward the kind of life I wanted. A life filled with love, stability, and eventually, a family. I'm truly happy with him, something I don't take for granted. This year, we found out I was pregnant. It wasn't something we had planned for right away, but it wasn't an unwelcome surprise either. Kael and I had always dreamed of starting a family, and while the timing may have been unexpected, The excitement was real. We were overjoyed and immediately began planning for this new chapter in our lives. The first thing we did was get married. It was a small, intimate ceremony, just close friends and family. Saffron, of course, was my bridesmaid. Having her by my side on that day meant the world to me. Vesper attended the wedding, but throughout the ceremony, I could sense her disapproval, though I wasn't entirely sure why. She looked frustrated, like something about the whole event bothered her. Later, when we had a moment alone, she finally let her feelings spill out. She told me, rather bluntly, that she never wanted me to marry someone like Kyle. In her mind, I was making some kind of mistake by being with him, and then she went on to tell me how she had actually hoped I would get back together with my ex-boyfriend, Rune. I couldn't help but laugh when she said it. It was such an absurd suggestion, so out of touch with the reality of my life now. I thought maybe she had had a little too much to drink at the wedding and was just speaking nonsense. The idea that she was still stuck on my ex when I had moved on and found happiness with Kale was almost laughable. I tried to ignore her comments, like I've learned to do over the years, but deep down, it did bother me that even on one of the happiest days of my life, my wedding day, Vesper couldn't just be happy for me. Instead, she had found a way to criticize and make me feel like I wasn't living up to her expectations. But this time, thankfully, I had other things in my life to focus my energy on. I had Kale by my side, a baby on the way, and for once, I chose to focus on the love and joy in my life rather than Vesper's negativity. After Kale and I got married, we decided to wait until the wedding was over to announce the big news. I was pregnant. We both felt it was right to share this news only after our wedding, so that nobody could question us. Torin, Saffron, and Cassian were thrilled when we told them. They were genuinely overjoyed for me, and their happiness made that moment even more special. But as expected, Vesper had to throw in her own brand of negativity, as if she couldn't just let me have that happiness without a sour comment. She started by questioning whether I was sure about having a child, making remarks about how I might regret jumping into motherhood without first enjoying married life with Kale for a few years. Her words took me by surprise. It felt like she was projecting her own regrets or unresolved issues onto me. I couldn't believe that even in this joyous moment, she couldn't support me without making me second-guess myself. But this time, I didn't let her words slide. I was becoming a mother, and the thought of her trying to belittle or overshadow my happiness, and worse, potentially doing the same to my child, made me stand my ground in a way I never had before. I calmly reminded her that I was not her, and that I would never regret having a child with a man I love. I made it clear that no matter what the timing was, I had no doubts about becoming a mother. For so long, I had let her walk all over me, picking apart my decisions, making me feel small. But this time was different. I wasn't going to allow her to manipulate or undermine me anymore, especially when it came to my family. That's when Vesper revealed her true feelings. She said she couldn't believe that I, the daughter she had always treated as second best, was the first to get pregnant and give the family its first grandbaby, and that she had always expected Saffron to win. As if this wasn't enough, Vesper then went on to justify that she just wasn't ready to be a grandmother so soon, and accused me of trying to ruin her reputation and her social circle by having a baby so soon after getting married. Hearing her say that was like a slap in the face. Not only did she outright insult me, but now my pregnancy, my joy, was somehow an inconvenience to her image. It was a shocking display of selfishness, even for Vesper. She wasn't worried about me or my future as a mother. She was only worried about how she would look to her friends. At that point, I had had enough. I firmly told her that if she truly felt that way, she wouldn't have any role in my child's life. I told her that if her reputation was more important than being a supportive mother and grandmother, then she was officially banned from my child's life, and I would be going no contact with her. The conversation quickly escalated into a huge argument, with emotions running high on both sides. But I asked her to leave. Ever since then, Vesper has been sending me multiple messages, trying to guilt-trip me into apologizing for my outburst. She says she just wanted to be truthful about how she felt and has accused my pregnancy hormones of making me overly sensitive. She thinks, as my mother, she has every right to voice doubts about my quick marriage and pregnancy. I wondered if I should just cut Vesper off from my life after the way she has treated me. A week later, Vesper had no choice but to back down. Saffron and Cassian apparently called her out for being insensitive toward me and asked her to let this matter go. It seems, for the first time, Vesper has also realized I was serious about cutting her out of my life and understood that I wouldn't tolerate her toxicity anymore, especially when it came to my child. She has reluctantly apologized to me, promising not to be so negative about my pregnancy or my marriage again. Well, buckle up, because 3 days ago, Saffron threw me a beautiful baby shower. Everything was perfect, just as I had imagined. Vesper, of course, was present, though she seemed unusually nervous that day. I noticed she kept glancing at the door, as if she were expecting something or someone to arrive. Then, when the doorbell rang, everything changed. Vesper practically jumped off the couch and made an announcement to the room. She had a surprise for everyone. I had no idea what to expect. I thought it might be something small, maybe a gift or a guest I wasn't expecting. But I could never have predicted what would come next. To my complete shock, it was Rune, my ex-boyfriend. He looked beyond uncomfortable, clearly out of place, as Vesper dragged him into the room, parading him in front of everyone like some bizarre spectacle. I was completely confused. This was my baby shower, my special day, and yet here was my ex, standing in front of me. I couldn't understand what was happening. Vesper then told me how she had talked with Rune for weeks and had convinced him to finally show up and give me a second chance. She then looked at me and told me that she knew I was settling for less by being with Kale, but that I didn't have to worry anymore, as Rune was here for me. Suffice it to say, my guests were all horrified, exchanging shocked glances after hearing what Vesper had to say. I kept looking from Vesper to Rune, trying to comprehend what was unfolding. That's when Rune, looking both embarrassed and apologetic, started speaking. First, he apologized for interrupting the baby shower and told me he never wanted to be here, which only added to the confusion swirling in my mind. Then, he continued to tell me how Vesper had hounded him on Facebook, sending him relentless messages, wanting him to profess his undying love for me. She was convinced that he and I were meant to be together and that I was making a terrible mistake by having a baby with Kale. Vesper, in her deluded state, had told him that I was wasting my life by becoming a mother so soon and that she wanted him to take me away. The whole thing was so absurd, I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Rune explained that he had no intention of rekindling anything between us, but he felt he needed to come and tell me face to face just how vile Vesper had been acting behind my back. He was there to expose Vesper's manipulative behavior. As he spoke, I could feel the tension in the room rise. Everyone was staring at Vesper, whose face had gone bright red with embarrassment. She had clearly never expected him to speak of her that way. Rune then turned to Vesper and, with a firm voice, told her she needed to stop messaging him. He said she needed to move on with her life and had no right to sabotage my baby shower. I could see the anger and humiliation on Vesper's face, but for once, she didn't have a snappy comeback or a defense. Rune continued to tell her that he had always known her to be jealous of me and that he was very disappointed to see that she had never changed, even after all these years. Vesper stood there, speechless, as the weight of her actions became apparent to everyone in the room. After Rune had finished, he turned to me and apologized again. He said he was sorry for the disruption, but felt it was necessary to reveal the truth about Vesper's behavior, as he wanted me to see the true face of Vesper. Before leaving, he handed me a small gift he had brought for my baby, which was really sweet of him. Despite the awkwardness of the situation, I thanked him for coming and for having the courage to tell me what was going on. Without his honesty, I don't know if I would have ever believed that Vesper could do something like this, plotting behind my back, trying to continue to sabotage the most important moments of my life. After Rune left, the room was filled with an uncomfortable silence, and all eyes were on Vesper, who looked like she wished she could disappear. She was on the verge of tears, overwhelmed by humiliation. I could hardly believe what had just unfolded. My own mother had tried to undermine me in the most hurtful way imaginable. That moment solidified everything I had long suspected, that Vesper wasn't just difficult or critical. She was actively working against me, driven by her own insecurities and jealousy. Since then, both Saffron and I have had no contact with Vesper. The rest of the family, who were also present during my baby shower, have spread the word around, and no one wants anything to do with Vesper now. Torin has threatened Vesper to stay as far away from me as possible. I am still unable to comprehend the lengths Vesper can go to try to sabotage my life. 8 months later, our baby was born healthy and is doing well. Kale and I are great. Saffron, Torin, and Cassian have visited us several times, and we all meet up regularly. None of us are in contact with Vesper. Cassian is currently separated from her. It turns out that after he found out and confronted her about everything, she refused to apologize to any of us and tried to justify her behavior. He finally realized that if she could treat me, her own daughter, in such a horrible way, then there was no guarantee she wouldn't do the same to him or anyone else she claimed to care about. Her selfishness knows no bounds, and he understood that he was better off without her.